Tay sat on the cold metal floor of his cell and stared at the ceiling. 3 months had passed since the Velrath soldiers captured him. His crime was simple. He flew his ship into their protected space while exploring. Now he was a prisoner on their detention station, floating somewhere far from Earth. The Velrath were tall reptilian creatures with scales that shimmered green and black. They ruled over dozens of planets with their military power. Everyone feared them. Their soldiers carried weapons that could burn through steel, and they never showed mercy to their enemies. Tay's cell was small but clean. They fed him twice a day. The guards mostly ignored him. He was in what they called the diplomatic wing. This section held prisoners who might be useful for negotiations later. Down the hall was something else. Something the guards whispered about with fear in their voices. The Royal Nursery. Dr. Yan, another human prisoner who worked in the science labs, had warned him during their brief meeting in the exercise yard. "Stay away from that section," she said, her voice tight with concern. "They keep the Raxel cubs there." "What are Raxel?" Tay asked. Yoon's face went pale. "Monsters. The Velrath breed them as war beasts. Even as babies, they are deadly. Last month, 3 handlers died when they tried to feed them. The guards are terrified." Tay should have listened to her warning. But late one night, he heard sounds through the walls. Soft chirping noises, almost like a bird, but deeper. Then came a thump. Then silence. Then the chirping again. But this time it sounded wrong. Distressed. Scared. He pressed his ear against the wall. The sound was definitely coming from the nursery section. Something was in trouble. Tay looked up at the vent in his ceiling. He was an engineer before all this happened. Ships, stations, life support systems. He understood how things worked. The vent connected to the main air system. If he could reach it, if he could remove the cover, maybe he could see what was happening. He stacked his sleeping mat and food tray to make a platform. It was barely tall enough. His fingers found the edges of the vent cover. The screws were old. He used the edge of his meal spoon to turn them. It took 20 minutes, but the cover came loose. The vent shaft was narrow. Tay pulled himself up with effort. His shoulders barely fit. He crawled forward slowly, trying not to make noise. The metal was cold against his hands and knees. After 15 meters, he found another vent opening. Light came through the slats. He peered down into a large room filled with strange equipment. Containment cages lined the walls. Most were empty, but in the center of the room, one cage was broken. Metal bars bent outward. Sparks came from damaged wiring. And there, trapped between fallen equipment and broken bars, was a creature. The Raxel cub was about the size of a large dog. Its body was covered in dark purple scales that faded to silver along its belly. 6 legs ending in claws. A long tail with spikes. Its head was sleek and reptilian, with 4 eyes that glowed faintly yellow in the dim light. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time, the cub chirped again. One of its back legs was caught under a heavy metal beam. It pulled and struggled, but couldn't get free. Blood, dark blue blood, stained the floor beneath it. Tay knew he should leave. Go back to his cell. Pretend he saw nothing. But the sound the cub made reminded him of the injured animals he used to help back on Earth. His grandmother ran a rescue center. She taught him that all creatures, no matter how dangerous, felt fear and pain. He carefully removed the vent cover and lowered himself down. His feet hit the floor with a soft thud. The cub's head snapped toward him. All 4 eyes locked onto his face. Its mouth opened, showing rows of sharp teeth. A low growl rumbled from its throat. "Easy," Tay said softly. "Easy there? I'm not going to hurt you." He moved slowly, keeping his hands visible. The cub watched his every movement. Its body tensed, ready to strike if he came closer. but it couldn't move far. The beam held it trapped. Tay started humming an old song his grandmother used to sing while working with scared animals. Soft and steady. He hummed and moved closer, one small step at a time. The cub's growl faded. Its eyes stayed fixed on him, but something changed. The pure fear in them lessened slightly. "That's it," Tay whispered. "I'm here to help." He reached the beam. It was heavy, made of reinforced steel, but the way it fell created a lever point. If he could lift one end just a little, the cub could pull its leg free. Tay grabbed the beam and pulled. His muscles screamed. The beam didn't move. The cub made a soft sound. Not aggressive. Almost questioning. "One more try," Tay said, more to himself than the creature. He braced his feet and pulled with everything he had. The beam shifted. Just a few centimeters. But enough. The cub yanked its leg free and scrambled away from the broken cage. It limped on 3 legs, holding the injured one off the ground. Blood dripped steadily. Tay slowly approached again, still humming. He tore a strip from his prison shirt and knelt down. The cub watched him but didn't retreat. Carefully, very carefully, he wrapped the cloth around the wounded leg. The cub flinched but allowed it. When he finished, Tay sat back. The cub looked at him with all 4 eyes. Then, something impossible happened. It limped forward and pressed its head against Tay's chest. The purring sound it made vibrated through his whole body. Tay carefully put his hand on the cub's head. The scales felt warm and smooth. The cub closed its eyes and leaned into his touch. That was how the guards found them an hour later. The human prisoner sitting on the floor of the nursery, with a Raxel cub sleeping peacefully in his arms. Commander Veshtol, the head of station security, stood frozen in the doorway. His hand hovered over his weapon. 20 guards stood behind him, all with their guns raised. Nobody moved. Nobody dared breathe too loud. Because everyone knew one thing about Raxel. They only had one mode when disturbed while resting. Kill. The standoff lasted for 3 hours. Commander Veshtol and his guards stood at the doorway, weapons ready but not daring to fire. Tay sat very still on the floor with the Raxel cub sleeping against his chest. He barely breathed. His arms ached from holding the same position, but he didn't dare move. The cub's purring filled the silent room like a low engine. Each breath made its scaled body rise and fall. Its claws, sharp as knives, rested gently on Tay's lap. One wrong move could turn this peaceful moment into a bloodbath. "Human," Veshtol finally spoke. His voice was a harsh whisper. Very slowly, put the creature down and back away. Tay swallowed hard. "I don't think that's a good idea. That was not a request." "I understand, Commander. But if I put it down suddenly, it will wake up startled." "Startled Raxel are dangerous, right?" Veshtol's scales darkened with frustration. He knew the human was right. Everyone had seen what happened when handlers disturbed sleeping Raxel. The memory of 3 dead guards was still fresh. "Then what do you suggest?" Another voice came from behind the guards. Ambassador Solmara pushed through the crowd. She was older than most Volrath. Her scales faded to a light gray, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Let it wake naturally," Tay said quietly. "It will take a few more hours." Solmara studied him carefully. "How did you get in here?" "Through the vent. I heard it crying. It was trapped and hurt, and you decided to rescue it? Do you not value your life, human?" Tay looked down at the sleeping cub. It was in pain. I couldn't just ignore that. The ambassador made a clicking sound in her throat. Among her species, it meant amusement. "Fascinating." "Commander, lower your weapons." "We wait." "Ambassador, this is highly irregular." "We wait," she repeated firmly. "And bring the security footage from this room. I want to see exactly what happened." The guards reluctantly lowered their guns, but stayed alert. Salmara disappeared and returned 20 minutes later with a datapad. She watched the footage 3 times. Her expression changed from curiosity to disbelief to something else entirely. 2 more hours passed. Finally, the cub stirred. Its eyes opened slowly, all 4 of them focusing on Tay's face. It made a soft chirping sound and licked his hand with a rough purple toe. Tay carefully stood up, keeping his movements smooth. The cub limped beside him on 3 legs, staying close to his side. "I need to check its wound properly," Tay said. "Do you have medical supplies?" A young guard nervously brought forward a medical kit. He placed it on the ground and backed away quickly. The cub hissed at him, making the guard jump. "Hey, none of that," Tay said gently to the cub. "He's helping." The cub stopped hissing but kept watching the guard with suspicious eyes. Tay knelt down and opened the kit. He removed his makeshift bandage and examined the leg. The bleeding had stopped. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic and wrapped it properly. The cub sat still the entire time, occasionally nuzzling Tay's arm. When he finished, the cub refused to return to its containment area. Every time a guard tried to guide it back, the cub would bare its teeth and move closer to Tay. Finally, they gave up. "It appears you have adopted a predator," Salmara observed dryly. "Or perhaps it has adopted you. Can I take it back to my cell?" Tay asked. "It seems calmer with me." Veshtal looked like he wanted to refuse, but Salmara nodded. "Let us see what happens. This situation is unprecedented. Commander, have the science team review all data on Raxil bonding behavior and move this human to a larger cell." By morning, Tay was in a new cell 3 times larger than his old one. The cub stayed with him constantly. When food arrived, Tay noticed they brought 2 meals. One for him and raw meat for the cub. Dr. Yun was allowed to visit that afternoon. She stared at the cub in shock. "Tay, what have you done?" "Helped an injured animal," he said simply. The cub was playing with a piece of cloth, pouncing on it like a kitten. It was hard to believe this playful creature was the same species that killed 3 guards. "They don't do this," Yun said, her voice full of wonder. "Raxil only bond with their alpha, and bonding happens through dominance. The strongest Raxil forces the others to submit through combat. But you didn't fight it. You didn't dominate it. I just helped it. That shouldn't work. According to everything we know about them, that shouldn't create a bond." Over the next week, scientists came to observe. They took notes and ran tests. The cub allowed them to examine it, but only when Tay was present and holding it. Without him, it became aggressive and uncooperative. The Velreth researchers were baffled. They measured hormone levels. They scanned brain activity. Nothing made sense. The cub showed all the signs of a bonded Raxil, but the bonding mechanism was completely different from anything in their records. "How do you control it?" One scientist asked Tay during an interview. "I don't control it. We're friends. Friends?" The scientist repeated the word like it was foreign. "Raxil do not have friends. They have alphas and subordinates." "Maybe that's the problem," Tay said quietly. "You treat them like weapons instead of living beings." Ambassador Salmara watched these sessions with great interest. She reviewed footage repeatedly, showing it to other high-ranking officials. Tay didn't understand the politics, but he could sense something changing. One evening, Veshtal came to his cell. The commander looked uncomfortable. "The High Council is interested in your case," he said. "They want to understand this bonding method. There are 6 more cubs in the nursery. All of them are considered too aggressive for standard training. You want me to work with them?" The ambassador suggests it, as does the science division. But I will be honest, human. If something goes wrong, if any of those cubs harm someone, you will be executed immediately. Tay looked at his cub, who was sleeping peacefully on a cushion someone had provided. The creature trusted him completely. It was happy and healing. Before, it was kept in a cage, scared and alone. "What happens to the cubs if I refuse?" Tay asked. Vestal was silent for a moment. "They will be terminated. Too dangerous to keep. Too aggressive to train." The answer made Tay's stomach turn. 6 young creatures would die because nobody understood how to treat them properly. "I'll do it," he said. "But I have conditions. Better living spaces for them. Proper food and enrichment. And no more cages unless absolutely necessary." "You are a prisoner negotiating terms?" Vestal's tone was dangerous. "I am someone who knows what these creatures need. Take it or leave it." Solmara's voice came through a speaker in the cell. She had been listening. "Agreed. You will have what you need, human. And you will have a new title. Raxo Handler Tay. Do not make us regret this decision." Tay looked down at the sleeping cub and wondered what he had just gotten himself into. The nursery looked different after 3 days of changes. The cages were gone. In their place were open spaces with climbing structures made from salvaged equipment. Soft materials covered the floors. There were hiding spots and elevated platforms. It looked less like a prison and more like a home. 6 Raxel cubs watched Tay from various corners of the room. His cub, the one he first rescued, stayed close by his side. The others kept their distance. Their eyes tracked his every movement. Some hissed. Some growled low in their throats. All of them were scared and angry. "They have never known kindness," Dr. Yun said from the observation window above. She had been assigned to document everything. Only force and punishment. Tay sat down cross-legged in the center of the room. His cub curled up next to him, purring contentedly. The other 6 watched this strange display. "I'm not going to hurt you," Tay said softly. "I know you don't believe that yet, but I'll wait until you do." He started humming. The same song his grandmother taught him. Slow and steady. His cub closed his eyes and relaxed completely. After an hour, one of the other cubs took 3 steps closer. Then it stopped and watched some more dot. This became Tay's routine. Every morning, he entered the nursery and sat in the same spot. He hummed. He talked quietly. His bonded cubs stayed with him, showing the others that this human was safe. Slowly, over days, the distance between them decreased. The first breakthrough came with the smallest cub. She was half the size of the others, with lighter-colored scales. The handlers called her a runt. They said she would probably die soon because she was weak. But Tay noticed she wasn't weak. She was smart. She watched everything carefully before acting. On the 5th day, she crept close enough to sniff Tay's hand. He stayed very still. A rough tongue licked his fingers once. Then she darted away. But she came back an hour later. And again, after that. By evening, she was sleeping against his leg. The second cub bonded 2 days later. He was the largest and most aggressive. Deep scars covered his scales from fights with handlers. He didn't trust anyone. But he watched how the 2 smaller cubs behaved with Tay, watched how they played without fear, how they ate without someone threatening them. When he finally approached, Tay saw the challenge in his eyes. The cub wanted to test him. He snapped his jaws near Tay's face, expecting him to flinch or hit back. Tay did neither. He just hummed his song and waited. The cub tried again, snapping closer, growling louder. Still Tay didn't react. Finally, confused and tired, the cub lay down just out of reach. The next morning, he woke up with his head resting on Tay's lap. 3 cubs bonded. Then 4. Then 5. Each one different. Each one with their own fears and scars. But all of them responded to patience and gentleness. Things they had never experienced before. The sixth cub was the hardest. She was blind in 2 of her 4 eyes from an old injury. The handlers said she was useless because damaged Raxel couldn't fight properly. She stayed in the darkest corner, refusing to come out even for food. Tay brought her meals to her corner. He sat nearby but not too close. He talked to her about Earth, about his grandmother's rescue center, about the animals she helped. He described the ocean and forests and mountains, things this cub would never see. After a week, she ate while he was there. After 2 weeks, she let him examine her injured eyes. After 3 weeks, she followed him around the nursery, staying in his shadow where she felt safe. All 7 cubs now bonded with Tay. The transformation was remarkable. They played together instead of fighting. They learned commands. They practiced hunting using toys and games Tay created. Their intelligence and coordination improved dramatically. Dr. Yun's reports attracted attention from across the empire. Scientists couldn't explain it. Military leaders saw opportunity. Politicians saw advantage. Everyone wanted to understand how one human accomplished what they're best. Trainers could not. More humans were brought to the station. Jin, who used to be a veterinarian on a colony world. He was in prison for treating injured rebels. Min, a xenobiologist who studied predator behavior. She was detained for protesting Velroth expansion. Together with Yun, they formed a research team. The bonding mechanism is completely different from normal Raxel behavior, Yun explained during a presentation to high-ranking officials. Normal bonding is hierarchical, based on dominance and submission. But what Tay created is cooperative, based on trust and mutual benefit. This is against their nature, one general argued. Raxel are weapons. They need strong control. Perhaps that's why your handlers keep dying, Min said bluntly. You're fighting against what they actually are. Social creatures. They need connection, not just domination. Jin added his observations. Look at their health markers. Stress hormones down 60%. Cognitive function up 40%. Physical coordination improved beyond baseline. They're not just healthier. They're smarter and more capable. The officials watched footage of Tay working with all 7 cubs at once. He gave a hand signal. All 7 sat in perfect synchronization. Another signal. They moved through an obstacle course as a coordinated unit. No aggression. No fighting for dominance. Just smooth cooperation. How long did this training take? Asked Ambassador Salmara. 5 weeks, Yun answered. Your traditional method takes 6 months and has a 50% failure rate. The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. Commander Veshtal spoke up. If this method is real, if it can be replicated, it would change everything. But we need to see if it works under stress. Under real conditions. What are you suggesting? Somara asked, though her tone said she already knew. A test. Put the human and his cubs in a real scenario. See if the bond holds under pressure. Tay was brought to the meeting room. The 7 cubs followed him in a loose formation. Normally, bringing Raxel into a room full of officials would be insane. But these cubs lay down calmly around Tay's chair. One rested its head on his foot. Another groomed itself peacefully. We want to test your training, Veshtal said. A simulation. There will be targets to eliminate, obstacles to overcome, threats to respond to. Can your cubs handle that? Tay looked at the 7 faces watching him with trust. They were still young, still learning, but they were ready. What happens if we succeed? He asked. Somara leaned forward. Then we talk about expanding this program. Training more handlers using your methods. Perhaps even discussing your freedom. And if we fail, then the cubs go back to standard training. And you go back to your cell. Back to cages. Back to fear and punishment. Back to the life these 7 creatures had before. Tay couldn't let that happen. "We'll do it," he said. "But not tomorrow. Give us 3 more weeks to prepare." 2 weeks, Vestal countered. "The High Council wants results quickly." "Fine. 2 weeks." That night in the nursery, Tay sat with all 7 cubs sleeping around him. They trusted him completely. He just hoped he was ready to protect that trust. From the observation window, Somara watched the scene with calculating eyes. She was playing a dangerous political game. If the humans succeeded, it would prove her rivals wrong about human weakness. If he failed, well, she had other plans. Either way, things were about to change in the Velreth Empire. And it all depended on 7 predator cubs and 1 human who refused to treat them like weapons. The simulation went perfectly. Too perfectly. Tay should have seen that as a warning. The test took place in a converted cargo bay, transformed into an obstacle course. Hostile drones. Moving platforms. Targets to neutralize. The 7 cubs moved like liquid shadow. They responded to Tay's signals with precision. They worked together, covering each other's movements. They completed the course in half the expected time. The watching officials were stunned. Even Commander Vestal looked impressed. Ambassador Solmara smiled her calculating smile and declared the test a success. Tay was moved to better quarters in the diplomatic wing. The cubs got a larger space with more enrichment. Everything seemed to be improving, but Jin noticed something during their evening meeting. "Somara has enemies," he said quietly. "Powerful ones. The military faction sees her as too soft. They don't like that she's using human methods to train Raxel. They think it makes the Empire look weak. What can they do about it?" Tay asked. "The results speak for themselves." Yun frowned. "Politics aren't about results. They're about power. If Somara gains too much influence from this program, others will try to stop her. And the easiest way to stop her is to eliminate what makes her powerful." "The cubs," Min said softly. "Or you, Tay, probably both." Tay felt cold. "You think they'd kill the cubs?" "They're valuable now. They're evidence that human methods work," Jin explained. "That evidence can't prove anything. They could claim the test was faked. Start over with traditional training. Somara loses credibility. We need to be careful," Yun warned. "Watch for anything unusual. Don't trust anyone outside our group." Tay took their warning seriously, but he didn't expect an attack to come so soon. Or in the way it did. 3 nights later, the station's night cycle brought dim lighting to all corridors. Tay slept in his new quarters. It was a real bedroom now, not a cell. Comfortable bed. Private bathroom. The door could be locked from inside. The cubs had their space next door, connected by an open archway. Tay woke suddenly. His instincts, honed from months of working with predators, screamed danger. The room was dark. Too dark. Someone had disabled the emergency lighting. He heard movement. Soft footsteps. Multiple people. Professional. Silent, but not silent enough. Before Tay could move, he heard something else. A low rumbling. Coming from the cubs' room. 7 different growls harmonizing into one threatening sound. The footsteps stopped. Then came padding sounds. Claws on metal. The cubs were moving. Tay's eyes adjusted enough to see shapes in the darkness. All 7 cubs emerged from their room. They didn't rush forward aggressively. Instead, they arranged themselves around his bed in a circle, facing outward, creating a living barrier between their human and any threat. Tay understood immediately. He stayed still, stayed quiet. Let them do what they were born to do. Protect their pack. From the shadows near the door, a harsh whisper. "Abort, we can't get past them." "Use the stunners," another voice replied. "Take them down." "You don't understand. The first voice was tight with fear. Look at their formation. If we attack one, they all react. 7 Raxil in a confined space. We'd be torn apart before landing a shot. Then shoot the human? Complete the mission? Through them? They're covering every angle. We can't get a clean line of fire. The cubs didn't move. Didn't attack. Just held their positions. Tay could hear their breathing. Controlled. Ready. They knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't random protective behavior. This was coordinated pack defense. More whispered argument in the shadows. Then the voices went silent. The assassins had left. But the cubs didn't move. They held position, knowing the danger wasn't over. Minutes passed. Then an alarm shrieked through the station. Emergency lights flooded the corridors. Running footsteps approached. Many of them. Commander Veshtal burst into the room with 20 guards. They stopped at the doorway, taking in the scene. Tay sitting up in bed. 7 Raxil surrounding him in perfect defensive formation. Their eyes glowing in the emergency lights. Nobody move, Veshtal ordered. His hand went to his communicator. Ambassador Salmara, you need to see this. More officials arrived. Somara came quickly, still dressed in her night robes. She looked at the formation, and her expression changed from confusion to understanding. How long have they been like this? She asked. I don't know, Tay said honestly. I woke up a few minutes ago. They were already in position. There were intruders, Veshtal reported, studying his datapad. Security detected unauthorized access to this section. 3 unknown signatures. They disappeared before we could lock down the area. Somara walked slowly around the room, examining the cubs' positioning. Remarkable. They created an optimal defensive formation. Every angle covered. No weak points. This level of coordination requires extensive training or, she paused, or instinctive pack behavior. Raxil don't have pack behavior, one scientist protested. They're solitary predators. Wild Raxil are solitary, Min's voice came from the doorway. She had arrived with Yun and Jin. But you've been breeding them in captivity for generations, taking them from their mothers at birth, isolating them. Maybe you've been working against their natural social development. Yun added, on Earth. Many predators are social in their natural state. Wolves, lions, orcas. Cooperation makes them more effective hunters. Maybe Raxil are the same, but your training methods never allowed them to express it. This human allowed it, Somara said thoughtfully. He created a pack structure, and now his pack protects him without being ordered to do so. The cubs still hadn't moved. They waited, patient and alert. Tay realized they were waiting for a signal. He spoke softly. Stand down. We're safe now. As one, all 7 cubs relaxed their stances. They moved away from defensive positions and came to him, nuzzling his hands, seeking reassurance that everything was okay. He petted each one, checking them for any signs of stress. They were going to kill you, Jin said quietly to Tay. If the cubs hadn't been there, I know. Veshtal's communicator beeped. He listened, his scales darkening with anger. We found them. 3 hired assassins. They're in custody. They were paid to eliminate the human and make it look like a Raxil attack gone wrong. Who hired them? Somara asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. They're refusing to talk. But the credits trail leads to accounts controlled by General Karvesh's faction. The military faction. The ones who oppose Somara-S reforms. The ones who thought humans were weak and their methods were wrong. This is a declaration, Somara said coldly. They've chosen to move against me directly. What happens now? Tay asked. Now? Somara looked at him and the 7 cubs arranged protectively around him. Now this gets much more complicated. You and your cubs just became the most valuable assets in a political war. And the most dangerous. For the rest of the night, guards stood watch outside Tay's quarters. Inside, the 7 cubs refused to return to their own space. They slept on and around his bed, keeping him in the center of their protective circle. Tay didn't sleep. He watched his cubs and realized the truth. They weren't weapons. They weren't tools. They were people in their own way. People with thoughts and feelings and loyalty. People who chose to protect him, not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to. The Velreth Empire bred them as monsters. But given the chance, they became something else entirely. Something their creators never expected. A family. The political storm broke 3 days after the assassination attempt. General Karvish and his allies demanded an investigation into Solmara's dangerous experiments. They claimed Raxo trained with soft human methods would be useless in real combat. They called Tay a security risk. They wanted the program shut down and all cubs returned to traditional training. Solmara fought back. She released footage of the cubs' defensive formation. She shared test results showing improved performance. She brought scientists to testify. But it wasn't enough. The military faction had influence, and they used it ruthlessly. The compromise came from an unexpected source. Empress Calveth herself, ruler of the Velreth Empire, arrived at the station unannounced. She was ancient by their standards, her scales almost white with age. But her mind was sharp, and her authority absolute. "I will see this human and his cubs personally," she declared. "And then I will decide." They prepared the largest meeting hall on the station. The Empress sat on an elevated platform. Around her stood the most powerful figures in the empire. Military commanders, political leaders, scientists, all waiting to see what would happen. Tay entered with the 7 cubs. They had grown since that first night in the nursery. Nearly full size now. Their scales had darkened and sharpened. They moved with lethal grace. Any one of them could kill everyone in the room in seconds, but they walked calmly beside Tay, curious but not aggressive, alert but not threatening. They sensed this was important. They matched his energy perfectly. The Empress studied them for a long moment. "They are magnificent," she said finally. "I watched them bred for generations, designed to be the perfect weapons. But they always failed. Too aggressive to control. Too violent to train properly. We lost more handlers than we gained soldiers." She turned her gaze to Tay. "How did you succeed where our best trainers failed?" Tay chose his words carefully. "I didn't try to dominate them. I tried to understand them, explain. Everyone saw them as weapons, things to be controlled. But they're alive. They think and feel. They need more than just commands and punishment. They need connection, purpose, trust." General Karvish spoke up angrily. "This is exactly the problem. He makes them soft, weak. They should fear their handler, not love them. Fear ensures obedience. Does it?" Tay asked. "How many handlers died using your method? How many cubs were killed because they couldn't be controlled? That's the price of creating perfect soldiers." "No," Tay said firmly. "That's the price of treating living creatures like objects. You broke them and wondered why they didn't work right." The room erupted in angry voices. But the Empress raised one hand and silence fell immediately. "Show me," she commanded. "Prove your method is superior." "How?" Tay asked. The Empress gestured to General Karvish. "Bring your best trained Raxel, the one you claim is a perfect weapon. Let us see both methods side by side." The general smiled coldly. "As you wish, Your Majesty." They moved to the testing area. Karvish's Raxel arrived in a reinforced cage. It took 6 handlers with shock prods to control it. The creature was massive, covered in scars. Its eyes were filled with rage. When it looked at its handler, there was only hate. The test was simple. Both Raxel would complete the same obstacle course. Speed, precision, and responsiveness would be measured. Karvesh's Raxel went first. The handlers shocked it toward the starting position. It snarled and snapped at them. When released, it attacked the course with pure fury. It was fast. It was powerful. It destroyed targets efficiently. But it also destroyed parts of the course itself. It fought against everything, even the test. When finished, it took 10 handlers to get it back in the cage. One handler was injured in the process. 16 seconds, the announcer called out. 73% accuracy. Significant collateral damage. Now it was Tay's turn. He chose his first cub, the one he rescued that first night. She was grown now, sleek and powerful. But she walked calmly beside him without any restraints. At the starting line, Tay knelt down and looked into her eyes. "Ready?" he asked softly. She chirped. The sound was gentle, trusting. "Go." She moved like lightning, flowing through the course with impossible grace. Every movement precise, every target eliminated cleanly. No wasted energy, no unnecessary destruction. She wasn't fighting the course. She was dancing through it. 8 seconds, the announcer said in disbelief. 98% accuracy. No collateral damage. The room fell silent. Then Tay did something that made everyone gasp. He walked onto the course while his cub was still completing it. She was moving fast, focused on targets. But when she sensed him, she adjusted her path instantly, avoiding him, moving around him, protecting him even while completing her task. He reached the end platform and she finished right beside him, breathing hard but not aggressive. She nuzzled his hand and purred. The contrast was absolute. Karvesh's Raxel was a weapon. Tay's cub was a partner. Again, the Empress commanded. Use all 7. This test was different. Multiple targets. Changing obstacles. Threats from all directions. Designed for teams. Karvesh would need at least 3 of his trained Raxel to complete it. Tay stood in the center with all 7 cubs. He gave one simple hand signal. They exploded into motion, but not chaotic, coordinated. They split into groups. They covered each other. They communicated with chirps and body language. They flowed through the complex course like they were one organism with 7 bodies. And throughout it all, they maintained a defensive perimeter around Tay, protecting him while completing the mission. Something traditional training said was impossible. Raxel couldn't multitask. They can balance combat and protection simultaneously. These 7 just proved that wrong. 20 seconds, the announcer called. 100% accuracy. Perfect team coordination. 0 damage. 0 injuries. The Empress stood. The entire room rose with her. She walked down from her platform slowly. Guards moved to intercept her, afraid of the Raxel. She waved them away. She approached Tay and the 7 cubs. They watched her carefully, but didn't threaten. They waited for Tay's signal. "May I?" she asked, extending her hand toward the nearest cub. "You can try," Tay said. "But move slowly. Let them smell you first." The Empress, ruler of a galactic empire, carefully offered her hand to the cub. The cub sniffed, then allowed the touch. The Empress ran her hand along the scales with something like wonder in her eyes. "In 300 years, she said quietly, I have never touched a Raxel without it trying to kill me." She looked at Tay. "What you have done here is not just training. It's not a method or technique. You've revealed what they truly are. What they could always have been if we had treated them correctly." She turned to address the crowd. "General Karvesh, your methods have produced weapons that barely work and kill their own handlers. This human's methods have produced something far more valuable. Partners. Soldiers who think, who coordinate, who protect, who choose to serve rather than being forced. Your Majesty, Carvish protested. This goes against everything. Everything we thought we knew, she interrupted. And we were wrong. Centuries of failure should have taught us that. But it took a human prisoner to show us the truth. She looked back at Tay. You have 3 choices, human. First, you may return to your people, free, with full pardon for your crimes. The cubs will remain here, but we will use your methods to train them humanely. No, Tay said immediately. I don't leave without them. I expected that response. Second choice. Stay here as Raxel Master. High rank, wealth, authority. You would oversee the entire breeding and training program. Transform it completely. What about the other human prisoners? Dr. Yun, Jin, Min, and the others? Released or offered positions, as they prefer. Tay considered. It was tempting, but something felt wrong about becoming part of the Empire's military machine, even to help the Raxel. And the third choice? The Empress smiled slightly. The choice I hope you take. Become an ambassador. Not to any one species, but to the idea of interspecies cooperation. Take your cubs. Travel the Empire. Show others what you've shown us. Teach the method to those who want to learn. Help us understand that strength isn't just domination. I would be free? The cubs would be free? You would be honored guests, protected, supported. Your methods would be studied and spread, but always crediting their source. The human way. Cooperation over conquest. Tay looked at his 7 cubs. They looked back at him with trust and affection. They had grown from scared, abused creatures into confident, capable beings. But that was just 7. How many more Raxel were suffering under the old methods? How many other species were treated as mere tools? I accept, he said. On one condition. Any Raxel trained with my methods can never be forced into combat. They choose whether to serve. They choose their paths. Like any free person. The Empress was quiet for a long moment. Around the room, military leaders looked outraged. But Salmara smiled. Agreed, the Empress finally said. And that policy will extend to all species we use in military service. Freedom of choice or no service at all. The decision shook the Empire. Many military leaders resigned in protest. Others adapted. Slowly, gradually, things began to change. 3 months later, Tay stood on the observation deck of a diplomatic ship. 7 fully grown Raxel stood with him, looking out at the stars.